We hold these truths to be self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all humans are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's our bodies, our choice, a basic American right.
Conceived in trauma, born into another trauma. That's where it is. And that is my personal story. I am the product of a 15-year-old. My father was 28 years old, which also means the likelihood he was probably violating my mother as early as 14, maybe even younger. My mother did not survive that. She took on her own self-medication, medicating herself with her depression and trauma, and was dead before she was 28 years old. We are so consumed with the unborn child, and there's nobody here to protect the child who's being violated, to protect the child once they're born here. We have to look at things differently here. I know without a doubt that my mother, one, did not have a choice in 1968. There was no choice for her. So she was forced to carry me to term. I know that because of that, I saw things and heard things and experienced things that I probably shouldn't have before I was 13 years old. I know now as an adult that my mother endured extreme depression because she didn't have a choice back then. We can't take this choice from women. We can't take this choice from families.
My parents are not originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. They're from Nashville, Tennessee. And not being from here, during the summer and holidays, my mother and I and my daddy would go to her first cousin and her family's house in Mississippi. We would alternate summers. They would spend a summer with us. We would go spend a summer with them. For holidays, we would spend Thanksgiving. They would come here for Christmas, and we would flip it back and forth every year. Well, being an only child, I was ecstatic to have other cousins in the house to play with, even though the youngest one was 6 years older than me. At the age of 11, the one that is 16, I'm 11 at the time, he started touching me inappropriately. And as with most predators or child molesters, it always starts off subtle. And then over time, it begins to grow into something big and blown out of proportion. So as time went on and we continued to go to their house, one Thanksgiving, he kissed me and forced himself on me. And of course, with all predators, that fear of you better not tell nobody is always implanted in the child's head. I'm 11 years old, he's 16. So that Christmas, we went by their house and the same thing happened 2 or 3 times. Well, my mother always kept a calendar to check to make sure my menstrual cycle would come down when it was supposed to. And this particular month, it didn't come down. 3 weeks later, still no menstrual cycle. So she decided to take me to her OBGYN, and lo and behold, I was pregnant. Now, for some of you may remember, on St. Charles, coming from Canal Street, before you get to Jackson, there was a large building that was on the left-hand side that was called Delta's Women Clinic. I had to go there for the first day to get the pre-op, and the second day, I went to have the procedure done. So long story short, I did have the abortion. We continued to go by their homes because for some reason, my mother was more concerned about her relationship with her cousin than she was with me. At the age of 59, I am very grateful to the decision that my parents made for me to have an abortion at the age of 11, because growing up, I was able to partake in everything in high school and in college. I was able to see young ladies that had babies at 12, 13, and 14 that missed out on so much of their young life because they had to raise a child. And even more so, when you're molested by a family member or a friend of the family, there's never going to be a love-happy relationship with a child coming to the world. You have a broken mother and you have a child that's going to come into this world damaged. The mother and father is never going to have a happy medium. There's never going to be discussion. They're never going to go sit and watch the basketball game together. That's just horrible. And I appreciate the decision that my parents made for me to have this abortion. In 2019, my cousin died. And at that time, it was the first time I felt like I was finally free.
My mom, she had me when she was young, 17 years old. My dad wasn't a part of the the situation. So she had somebody else adopt me. And I didn't find out that that man was not my dad until I was 19 years old. That was a blow. That was really a blow to my self-esteem and to who I was. A lot of people have the children because they can't afford the abortion, and the children end up in poverty. They end up being abused. They end up being neglected. Sometimes they're put into a system where they're worse off, and they grow up with all kinds of issues. I've seen people who grew up in the system, and a lot of them turned out to be drug addicts. Some of them did well for themselves, but they said if they had a choice, if they were in the same positions as their parents, they probably would have had an abortion rather than put their children through what they went through.
One of the reasons that the reversal of Roe versus Wade touched me, I guess you can say personally, is that I had a 4-year-old sister in 1980 who was raped and beaten to death by her mother's boyfriend, his messed up sister. And I think about the 10-year-old young lady who was forced to recently have an abortion. I thought to myself that that could have been my sister. And inasmuch as it could have been my sister, I certainly would not have wanted her at such a young age to be forced to carry a baby for someone who is not even in our lives, but at the same time, such a tender kid. And these are the types of issues we're going to have to deal with. I mean, that was in 1980. Here in 2022, we have a 10-year-old who just had an abortion because of the same type of assault.
By no means do I believe that someone who is raped should have to be forced to carry a child and bring it to birth. When I have firsthand knowledge of having dealt with social work situations where I have had parents who did not like the child because they could not deal with the origin being their father. So with that having been said, I've had to deal with trying to mend families where the love did not exist because the child was not conceived in love. The child was not even conceived in like. So I've had to deal with that. But by the same token, you have to deal with the fact that a child born under those kind of conditions don't have complete connectivity because they have no connection to their biological parental side of the family, because not by the will of the mother, but by the lack of knowledge. If a child is the product of a rape or incest, the child is going to live in darkness and suffer sometimes unnecessary or unrequired hatred or resentment from that parent. And I've heard that people state that they should have those children and then the world or the society would then step in and that child could be adopted. But having worked as a social worker in child welfare, I know for a fact that there are thousands of foster children who do not get the opportunity to be adopted. And if we are going to subscribe to this particular philosophy, what are going to happen to all of these children who are being born to people who do not want children, or those children were products of incest or rape?
In a situation like rape, when you have no idea who that person is who raped you, I feel that a mother has the choice to decide if she's going to carry a child for 9 months, not knowing who the father is, and she has no love for that child and no expectations that she's going to expect from that child. So she will eventually have to ask or tell that child who their father is. And the mother is going to say, I don't know. I don't know what your background is. So where do we go from here? It's so much dismay, so much unexpected feelings that a mother has to go through in a situation that no one will understand but that mother.
God gives us free will. So why should man take away our free will to do what we want to do? And that's my...
In terms of my belief, I do not believe that people should have an abortion based on, my Christian beliefs. But it still comes down just like sin. God gives us we either choose to obey him or we choose to disobey him. You cannot use laws to legislate morals. I am against the reversal of Roe versus Wade. God gave us the right to make our own choices. In the book of Joshua, he said, choose you. So that gives us the right to choose. If we could choose him, we can choose everything else that pertains to life.
There was a conversation that came up about sexuality. And my mom said something that has stuck with me all my life, that God is a God of choice. He gives you free will. And that, in addition to the idea of what American democracy means, always were like pillars for me. So when the overturn of Roe happened, it was so like heartbreaking. It was almost like the dismantling of the work that was more than just about abortion rights or the pro-choice. It was more than these cliche words that we use, but it was me having to explain to my little girl, my daughter, how someone who has no clue about who she is or her life experiences gets to decide what happens with her body. Like the freedom and the will that God gives you can be easily taken away from you by a man through law.
You want to stand in the judgment seat or act like you are God, that is not your place, because judgment is going to happen to all of us. So if you feel that it is a mortal sin for them to do that, then the judgment is going to be rendered with or without your help. So I don't buy into people stating that we need to do this because of religious reasons, because the Bible that I read tells me that I'm to judge not.
As a Christian woman, as a woman raised in a Christian home and a Bible studying person, in fact, I'm a Sunday school teacher, I personally do not agree with abortion. But I do not agree with anything that sets a bias on one gender with no effect on the other.
I'm here today because Roe v. Wade has taken on the mindset of everyone. And it has moved personal to the genre of my body, my choice. When I first heard about that there would be a overturning or a disregarding rather of Roe v. Wade, it began to trouble me, because we have to understand that Roe v. Wade, first of all, is a civil right. And anytime you are in a battle for something that is your right, and it has been taken away or disregarded by people who never had to worry about that right for themselves, it becomes troubling. As a father, grandfather, godfather, as a spiritual father, pastor, I have counseled women. I even at one point married a woman who had was in need of the services of an abortion. Roe v. Wade is bigger than abortion. Roe v. Wade is humanity. Roe v. Wade is equality. Roe v. Wade is an acceptance. It is a right to a woman who may find herself in two situations, a situation where she may have been victimized or where her health may be compromised. So when we find ourselves stating that the federal government on the federal level will no longer protect that woman, we find ourselves in crisis mode. And when you look at the founding laws of this country, you look at the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act was put in place so that there could be a divide, rather, between government and basic human and civil rights. So you're taking that away.
With the overturning of Roe v. Wade, technically, I had an abortion. And I suffered an ectopic pregnancy. I had an 8-week fetus growing inside of my left fallopian tube, and I didn't know it.
And I was rushed. I went to the doctor because I was having excruciating pains and a lot of bleeding. And the doctor told me that I was pregnant, but he needed to run some tests. So I spent most of this Friday afternoon, April 7th, in the doctor's office, where basically he told me that I had a 8-week-old fetus that was growing in my left fallopian tube, and I was gonna have to have emergency surgery that day. So I had to go back home, talk to my partner and my friends, and get back to the hospital by 5 o'clock. So that's how important it was. It was a 5 o'clock on a Friday for a surgery. So he performed surgery.
I feel that people have a right to have an abortion. My mom didn't have an abortion because of the time that she lived in, and she didn't want to disappoint her parents. But when I was 14 years old, I got pregnant. And I had access to birth control, but I didn't know how to use it because nobody really explained anything to me. So I got pregnant, but I was too scared to tell my mom. So when my mom found out, she was like, she was a single mother of 2, and she told me that she had had an abortion a couple of weeks ago before she made me have an abortion because she just couldn't afford it anymore. And it hurt. It hurt because as the oldest child, I had the responsibility of my younger sibling. So I just felt that I wanted a child because someone of my own to love, but I was forced to have that abortion, and I don't regret it. I often wonder what that child would have been. I have no regrets because I know it would have changed my life. Being 14 years old, growing up in the ghetto with limited resources, I don't know where I could have been or where I would have been today. But I believe that women should have that choice.
Some children have their cycles now at 9 years old. Imagine that baby being violated, most likely by someone that she knows. So she's dealing with changing, her body changing, understanding that, then needing to deal with the violation of probably someone that she knows, and then carrying a child to term. Most 9-year-olds soaking wet are only 60 pounds. You want a 60-pound child to carry a child and to deal with gestational diabetes, hypertension. The likelihood of her being able to bore a child vaginally is slim to none, so then being cut with a cesarean. And then the life after. Depression, from 1, the violation, from 2, being forced to have the baby, 3, her hormones are all over the place. Women should have the power to take care of themselves, to make their own decisions. That 10-year-old, that 9-year-old's family should be able to make that decision. Because the 9-year-old can't drive, can't drink, can't vote, can't go to war, but you want the 9-year-old to have a baby and make that decision on her own. And no, we have taken sex education out of schools, so no one is even educating these kids onto what's going on.
This isn't an easy decision made by any woman. I have 2 people who are very, very special to me, who have had to have this procedure. They weren't single women, they weren't unemployed women, they were just women who could not afford to bring in another life and guarantee that that child had what it needed. It was not an easy process to go through with either one of those women. And I felt affected by it because there was nothing that I could do at that time to help. But I knew that these women who are so dear to me were taken care of, and that they had healthy options, safe options, and they had care. I don't know what's going to happen to these women now. What is it going to look like? Because the procedures are going to happen. I just wish that the protections would have stayed in place so that women could have healthy choices. Because now, what are the numbers of women dying from hemorrhaging? What are the number is going to be of women who have sterilized themselves because they've inflicted this procedure on themselves and did not have a professional hand to do these procedures.
I have a lot of mixed views about this. One is that I do believe in life, but over that, I do believe that people have the right to choose what they want to do in their lives. I have problems with understanding how people can dictate what you can do with your body, and then the government is going to support that decision, especially when there's no exceptions being granted. In many of the states in the United States, there's no exceptions for circumstances that arise. I don't believe that we should choose the life of an unborn child over the life of a person trying to give birth to a child. So if there's a situation where a parent, a mother rather, her life is in danger because she's carrying this child, and they believe that you cannot do a medical procedure that would save the life of the mother, who would then be able to later on possibly give birth to a child, as opposed to forcing her to carry this child and possibly lose her life and the life of the child that you were initially trying to save.
We're actually taking control of women's bodies is what we're doing. We're taking control of their bodies. Women should have every right to make every decision as it relates to their complete bodily autonomy. And as it relates to the Constitution's particularly in the 14th Amendment, and you're going to start seeing a lot of challenges in relation to this, guarantees equal protection of the laws to citizens of the United States. Now, it defines a citizen as somebody that is actually born or naturalized here in the United States. And it doesn't say viable fetuses. And if we go back to the actual founding of the country and establishment of the United States Constitution, there was no way that our founders could ever imagine that we would be sitting here today talking about protecting unborn viable fetuses and a woman's right to privacy. When we look at that, it has a ripple effect. And this is the only instance where men completely get to make decisions over something that does not impact them too. So if we are going to legislate birth for women, then we're going to have to start looking at legislating the father obligation on behalf of men and come up with, what is the state going to do? Is the state going to provide additional funding? Is the state going to provide free prenatal care? Is the state going to provide nursery care? Is the state going to provide all the ancillary sources and resources that are necessary when a woman gives birth, or when a woman is a single mother, or when a woman is pregnant? What are we now going to do? Are we willing to take that next step and that next leap?
The decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, though it's been in play for a while, was very disappointing to me, very disheartening to me, for more than one reason. One, the effects of the reversal of Roe versus Wade will have a detrimental effect on our community, in particular the African American community, where we have a lack of resources, as well as education on abortions. Abortions are not just for those who are irresponsible intimately, but there are reasons health-wise why in some instances of an abortion would be necessary.
I've been a community health worker for more than 35 years now. I work community, and I work with community health workers who work the community. My statement is that we work with marginalized communities, Black and brown women who are going to suffer from Roe versus Wade. And the other side of me says these people who are putting this in place don't care about us at all. We're not cared about. And so it's okay if we get pregnant and we can't feed a child, or for women who just don't want a child. What's going to happen with these children? Where are they going to go? What are you as the government are going to do about this? And in my head, absolutely nothing is going to happen, because we've seen this before, not so much around the abortion piece, but around the fact that there are homeless children
who are not being helped in the communities at all.
Why do I feel that the results will have a negative effect on our community? Because we did not have, and we still don't have, the means necessary to be able to fly to another city or even locate a doctor who would trust us as much as they would trust someone else to be able to, in other words, they're not going to lay their lives on the line for an African American. Historically, by going through the civil rights movement and other things, I've had these experiences. I had the pleasure of growing up during the late 50s and going into the 60s. But my knowledge base about sex, sexual activity, and how to use prevention was limited, because at that time in the Black homes, you did not have a conversation about being sexually active or about sex, period. And you did not know anything about what we call how to protect yourself. My knowledge about being sexually active was not taught in the home, but it came from the street by conversating with my friends and my associates.
We as citizens need to vote our consciences, but our conscience must be educated about what the point is. Not Democratic or Republican, not popular words of the day, the soundbite that hits your ear, but what do we know? What do we think? What do we feel?
And elections matter. I'm a state representative. I sit on the House. I listen to Republican parties in their conversations. Know that wherever you are with Roe v. Wade, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, the elected officials are not concerned with that. They're on a completely different wavelength. It's about the power for them, not about you. It's not about the merit of the bill at all. We have to take control of this. It's not going to stop here. So I implore you, at the next election, get out and vote. We still can turn this thing around. It is important to use your voice, and not just for yourself, not just in Orleans Parish. Text your family members in other parishes. Call your family members in other parishes. Because until we change the face of who's making the decisions, it will only begin to get worse for us.
Little girls that are coming up now are going to have less protections than I have had in my lifetime. And that is not anything anyone should want or expect to have for their child to have less freedoms than they had. We always want more. And it brings me to wanting to say that you need to vote for everything. Voting matters in each aspect of our lives. We have legislators in the Louisiana, in the capital right now, who are saying women should not have these rights, that women should not have healthy options for abortion. Some legislators believe that a woman should be charged with homicide if she decides to abort her fetus, and that the doctor should be charged with homicide and lose their licenses. These are not the people who have your best interests in mind. And we need to make sure that we get out and we vote people in who do have our best interests in mind, and know that these things are going to happen. Women are going to continue to have abortions, but how?
I am determined that my daughter knows that her body is her choice. And so I am in this fight for the long haul. I am going to use my voice to actually activate other women to know that we're here and we're not going to be moved by a man's decision. And I know that sounds so harsh, man's decision. But yeah, I want us to
I think that this is an opportunity for us to actually come together, like so many other instances where rulings have changed the quality of life and the democracy that we have.
It is very important that we stand together and make sure that we do whatever we can to support each other, to make sure that this decision is reversed back to its original form.
Our bodies,
Our bodies, our choice. That is it.
51% of America's population is women or girls. With the reversal of Roe v. Wade, our lives have been limited. Our liberty restrained. Our ability to pursue happiness greatly, greatly constrained. Help us reclaim the right to choose what happens to our bodies. Join in the struggle for our mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters. This is a liberation movement.